Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talk, Listen, and Discuss. Today, I'm going to begin the conclusion of the Etan Patz series. And in this series, we're going to discuss why I believe that Pedro Hernandez is not the person responsible for the disappearance of Etan Patz. And I will provide an alternate explanation on what may have happened to Etan Patz. I will be bringing in a lot of research and a lot of documents in order to help support my theory. I also, where I can, provide links into the video description. And I want to add words of caution here. I really want to make sure that you do your own investigation, your own review of the materials I present here today, so that you can formulate your own opinion, whether it supports mine or not. Again, this is me just trying to get to what I believe is the truth, because what we have been presented as the narrative simply just does not make sense. And it goes beyond Pedro Hernandez's confession, and it's something that is very systemic. Are you ready to do this? Me too. Let's go. Okay, I'm going to also start off by letting you all know that this has not been easy. It hasn't been easy because I really don't know how I'm going to present all this information I've gathered to you today. A part of me just really wants to put it all out there and get every single article, resource, just throw it all at you so that you can see what I'm seeing. But that would be way too much information. But it's something that I really want to do, and I have to fight that because if I do that, we'll be here for months, just going through article after article, book after book, video after video, audio after audio. You see what I'm saying? I have done so much research on this. It has led me to so many different forms of media that I didn't even think that I would go to because I realized that this was something more than just a case that was bungled or a mystery that can't be solved. It is actually something that reflects very systemic issues that we have seen even as recently since the 2000s. And this is something, the issues that I will present are not going away. If anything, they're getting either more well known or they're becoming more excessive in their nature. But we're going to focus on this case and we will bring in other cases that may have influenced how law enforcement approach the mysterious disappearance of Etan Patz. I'm going to start here in this part of the opening statement. Mr. Fishbein. So I know we have listened to 2 hours of an opening. The prosecution delivered 2 hours of an opening, and that's what he's referring to here. But keep all of those rules in your mind and filter everything you hear over the next course of the months, over the next months through those rules. We talked a lot in Boy Dyer about the emotion that you are going to feel. Etan Patz, as a 6-year-old picture, a very cute kid, no question about it. For a mother, we heard the emotion in just listening to what they have gone through over the years. Granted, understood, but this is not the Etan Patz trial. This is Pedro Hernandez's trial, and we have your assurance, and it's not going to get any easier on Friday when Mrs. Patz testifies, but we have your assurance that you can separate the two, and we trust you on that. That's why you are sitting here. And I remind you about the biases that you might find, the belief that Mrs. Patz might admit or seeing Mr. Patz here in the courtroom every day, that they want resolution and that they're committed, that it's Pedro Hernandez. End it now. You can resolve it for them, but we understood and you understood during the questioning in voir dire that there may be no resolution here. And in fact, we believe that there won't be a resolution here. The only question that will be answered is with a not guilty verdict is that Pedro Hernandez had nothing to do with it. And that's the ball we must keep our eye on. Okay, I'm going to jump this paragraph and go to the next. Jose Ramos. Jose Ramos is a convicted child harmer. His pattern and demonstrated preference for victims are young, 4, 5, 6, 8-year-old white, blonde-haired boys. That's his preference. He has been convicted multiple times for harming young boys and will be in prison in Pennsylvania for the rest of his life. He has been there since 1987 and will be there until the day he dies, and that's good news for everybody. In 1979, he was living at 234 East 4th Street. He was nominally dating a woman by the name of Susan Harrington. Now, I say nominally because he really was spending time with Susan Harrington because Harrington had a son, 5-year-old Barrett Harrington. And he was really using Susan so he could have unfettered access to Barrett because we know through Ramos's admissions and Barrett Harrington that Ramos was doing bad things to Barrett Harrington. He was doing very inappropriate things to Barrett Harrington. Now, this is important because, as the prosecutor just mentioned to you, Harrington had been hired by the Patz family to escort Etan home from school during a school bus strike that lasted about 6 weeks and ended approximately the week before the Friday that Etan disappeared. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Some things that I want you to take a note, and we probably have discussed it before, but we need to really solidify it in our minds as I go through the resources, is that Jose Ramos met Susan Harrington, allegedly, they both said, in the welfare line. Jose Ramos lived very close to Susan Harrington and the Patz family. In fact, by walking, it would be about 20 minutes, and by bike, it would be about 10 minutes. And by car, it would take just even a few minutes. So it was a very close proximity to the Patzes. He was very familiar with that area. In fact, he would be very familiar with Greenwich Village and the East Village, as well as Soho, because these were the places that he made sure that he was involved in activities there, as well as he would sell his wares there. Remember, he sold trinkets, trash, things like that. From a blanket, he was a vendor and he sold things like that. And that's how he allegedly, according to him, made his money. Susan Harrington was indeed hired by the Patz family to walk Etan because the buses had been on strike. In fact, a lot of the buses had been on strike, not just the school buses, but also the city buses. And she not only walked Etan Patz, but she also walked two other friends of Etan's. And they would become important because they are going to let us know that despite what Susan Harrington said, she didn't always walk them alone. The two young girls who are now women now, one is Chelsea Altman, and the other one is going to be Kira. And right now her last name escapes me, but I'm pretty sure we'll be coming back to her. Now, this is important because, as the prosecutor just mentioned to you, Harrington had been hired by the Patz family to escort Etan home from school during a school bus strike that lasted about 6 weeks and ended approximately the Monday before the Friday that Etan disappeared. She also sometimes helped out in the daycare, and her 4-year-old, 5-year-old son, he may have been 4 or 5. It's a little bit unclear. He would also be in the loft either in the daycare or otherwise. Now, Susan Harrington, was trusted by the Patz family, and she was so trusted that she was asked to house sit Memorial Day weekend, which was May 25th, 1979. That Friday, she was going to house sit over the weekend while the Patz went away with the Alts, Chelsea Altman's mother, the mother and father, and Chelsea being the good friends of young Etan. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Indeed, Susan Harrington would offer that information that she was going to house sit for Julie Patz and that she had indeed help walk the children from school to home. They hired her to help out in that capacity. We'll take it a step further in that in the book After Etan, Susan Harrington and Julie Patz had a discussion about potentially bringing Susan Harrington on to help work with her, to help her with her daycare, to work with her for her. And this is something I do believe that Julie Pates also mentioned in her testimony during trial too. We may or may not come across that, but for now, I'm pretty sure it was introduced there that Susan Harrington, yeah, she was considering maybe offering her some kind of work through her daycare. Susan Harrington was very excited about that. She was very hopeful that that would happen. But of course, Etan Patz went missing on May 25th, 1979, and two things didn't happen. One, Susan Harrington would not be house sitting the loft while the Patzes were away because they weren't going to go away now. And then two, Julie Pates ended up closing her daycare, so there was no position for Susan Harrington waiting for her. It was through Harrington that Ramos had access to Etan. Let me stop here again. So Susan Harrington, again, another side note that you're going to want to hang on to. Susan Harrington was introduced to Julie Pates by somebody who already volunteered and worked for Julie Pates in her daycare. And that would be Terrell Donovan. Now, I do believe I located Terrell Donovan, and I did write her to see if it was indeed her because I really wanted to know, how did Terrell Donovan know Susan Harrington? How was that connection made to where she would recommend Susan Harrington to the Pates family? Because what we're going to find out is Susan Harrington was a single or about to be a single mom. I don't know if she was divorced yet or not when she moved from Augusta, Maine to New York. She found herself in New York City. I don't know who she knew there. I don't know why she thought to go there. I don't find it anywhere how she made the leap from Maine to New York. There didn't seem to be any work opportunities that were given to her for her to make that transition. But I also don't understand how Terrell Donovan, who seemed to be also an education student with NYU, who Julie Pates often selected students from NYU to come and work with her or volunteer with her because they could get their credits that way for their school program. But Susan Harrington wasn't at NYU. The only thing I can think of is that Terrell Donovan, just based on what I know of her, seems to have been immersed in community activities. So it may be very well that she was in some outreach placement programs, and maybe it was in that capacity she met Susan Harrington, because Susan Harrington was an alcoholic as well as a drug substance user. She lived in a very low economic situation, and she had her son Barrett in tow with her. And what we don't know now, but we will see later, is that she hung around people that were already on law enforcement's radar. And that is what I want to be remembered about Susan Harrington, is that she came in with connections that weren't very good. And yet somebody by Terrell Donovan, if I have found the right Terrell Donovan, and I believe I have, who seems very prosperous and has done really good things educationally, professionally, and personally, has done very well for herself. It was through Harrington that Ramos had access to Etan, another blonde, young white boy. You will find out that Susan Harrington appeared at the loft late Friday afternoon, sometime after Mrs. Pates had found that Etan did not go to school and was very upset. Okay, I'm going to stop here now. Put yourself in this mindset, because right now we don't understand it. If our child misses first period or second period, we get a phone call, whether automated or personally. Back then, that didn't happen. The child was simply marked absent. That's it. No follow-up call, nothing. So so Julie Pates would have gone throughout her day as normal, thinking that Etan Patz was going through his day as normal at school. That would be a good, we'll say 9 hours for travel time, that when Etan Patz, that there was an opportunity for Etan Patz to have been, we'll say, let's give this theory that he was abducted and he could have been taken anywhere. 9 hours is a long time to go unnoticed, to go under the radar. It's a long time for things that could have been missed to be covered up. Things like that. It's just a long time to work with, especially for nefarious criminal activities. are actors. Mrs. Patz had found that Etan did not go to school and was very upset. She told Harrington that young Etan had not been in school and was missing. Harrington left the loft and never returned, never again. In the book, according to Etan, Julie Patz was understandably so very scared and panicky, and she wanted Susan to help her find phone numbers to the hospital so they could start making calls. Susan Harrington wouldn't be there very long to help in that capacity, and then when she left there, she left. Susan Harrington didn't try to reach out to Julie Patz to see how things were going, to offer any more assistance or support. She didn't physically get into the search itself. Nothing. She went underground, crickets. Now, in March of 1982, Ramos and his connection to Etan first came to the attention of the police. But from what I have found, Jose Ramos was always on law enforcement's radar. In fact, we're going to see that the FBI most likely already knew about Jose Antonio Ramos. So here, for all the defense knows, is that in 1982 is when Jose Antonio Ramos becomes somebody that is highlighted, if you will, as being a person of interest for the Etan Patz disappearance. Now, in March of 1982, Ramos and his connection to Etan first came to the attention of the police. Ramos was arrested for trying to lure two young boys to a drainpipe in Van Cortlandt Park that Ramos was living in 1982. It was despicable conditions, but he had set up a little house in there, a little home, and you'll see it because there were photographs taken by the police, because this relatively minor event caused great concern with the NYPD and the Bronx District Attorney's Office, because found amongst the property of Ramos were pictures of young blonde-haired boys. One of them ended up being Barrett Harrington, and one was strikingly similar to Etan Patz. So strikingly similar that the police took the picture to the Patz family, but were told that they didn't think that was Etan. But the Bronx County District Attorney's Office decided that they were going to question Ramos while this investigation was going on. So they called in a ADA, that's an assistant district attorney, by the name of Frank Carroll, and Frank Carroll was one of the senior DAs in the Bronx, set up a video and sat down with Ramos and began talking to him, and you will see that entire video. We don't have that video, unfortunately. I don't have it, or else I would love to see that interview. In fact, I know there are some YouTube excerpts of that interview. And if you listen to how Jose Ramos presents himself, you can see that he looks one way, but he conducts himself another way. And it's during the course of that video that Ramos, for the very first time, says, "Oh, yeah, well, because Pate's name comes up, he says, you know, my girlfriend, Susan, or my girlfriend, she was Pate's babysitter." You will see that Frank Carroll takes a break when he finds out this information because he gets the name Susan Harrington, and he goes off camera and starts talking to other people, and he says, "Oh, we need more tape." From the book After Etan by Lisa Cohen, this is how this chapter starts. And I believe it is chapter 6. And they're segueing into how Frank Carroll is going to be the person to interview Jose Antonio Ramos. The day before, Assistant District Attorney Frank Carroll had picked up his phone to hear Bronx DA Mario Marola's familiar, rich baritone in his ear. "I want you to go talk to this guy they picked up in the drainpipe," his boss had said, with the air of a man who was obeyed without question. No one else, not the cops, no FBI, no one in the room but our office, and that would be the district attorney's office, the prosecution arm of law enforcement. So he didn't want the FBI involved, any police officers involved. He wanted somebody from the prosecuting arm of law enforcement, and that would be the DA's office. Don't let anyone at him till you're finished. Now, the reason why I bring this up is that during this time, and even now, but especially during this time in the 70s, New York was experiencing an influx of corruption. There had been the Knapp Commission that occurred in the late 60s that exposed a lot of the corruption that was occurring during that time with police officers, organized crime, state officials, federal officials, you name it, it was being done. And the reason this is still important is that crime, those offenses didn't just stop overnight because they were exposed. In fact, in some of the research material I have viewed, many of the experts say that the Knapp Commission was a start, but the result of it was mainly this. It's not that it ended the corruption, but that it made the good cops feel okay to be good cops. And that's it. That meant that the cops that were still accepting bribes, the organized crime that was still using these dirty cops to help them with muscle, intimidation, and cover-ups, this was still going on at the time. Therefore, that's why I believe that Mario Merola, because the Bronx division was probably the worst in corruption. From everything I've read, the Bronx was the worst, not only in organized crime activity, also in the dirty cops that belonged to it. And this is why I believe that Mario Merola did not want any police officers and didn't want the FBI involved, because the FBI would have been the ones that were investigating dirty cops, but had their own operations going on. And Merola probably didn't want to offer anything to the FBI at this point, because while they did work in collaboration on some things, there still was that rivalry that was very heavy at the time. Okay, moving back to the transcript. Now, in this video, you will see and hear Ramos say, "Oh, young Barrett, yeah, we were very close. He treated me like I was his father. I loved Barrett. We used to go places, all sorts of places all the time. I would never hurt Barrett." That was a lie. That's not Ramos saying that. This is the lawyer saying this. That was a lie. Let me pause here. There's an organization we're going to touch on briefly called NAMBLA. And we will touch on that briefly more because of the influence it had on this investigation, not that it necessarily was a part of this criminal activity. The members involved in NAMBLA really believed that what they did was not wrong. They thought that there was, and NAMBLA means the North American Man-Boy Love Association. They really did believe that they had relationships with these very, very underage boys, sometimes between the ages of 8 to 12. They really did believe that they weren't harming these boys, but that they were showing them how to love. When asked about Etan and asked about this picture, watch in the video how he dances around the question. First, he says, "No, I don't think the picture looks like him." "Well, did you ever see him?" "No, it's not that I saw him, but I did see him." "I mean, you just watch," but we know he is lying about that too. Now, Ramos was not arrested at that point for anything to do with Etan Patz. He was set free after the case in the Bronx was resolved, and he used that time to track, lure, and abuse boy after boy, and without fail, these boys were blonde and young. Why didn't the Bronx bring up charges against Ramos? Well, according to the book After Etan, the Bronx didn't have any jurisdiction over the Etan Patz case. That would have been the Manhattan office. They gave the information they did get and provided it to the Manhattan office, but that was as much as they could do because they felt if they went too much further, they could compromise that investigation. At least that's the explanation in the book After Etan, Lisa Cohen's book. You will also learn that Ramos liked to strike close to home, whether it was part of the thrill, part of the hunt, but he struck close to home with Barrett. He struck close to home with, on 2 separate occasions, 2 young boys in Pennsylvania, young blonde-haired boys. Young blonde-haired boys, white, and he would go to Pennsylvania and he was involved in this group that would congregate. Okay, so now the group that he's talking about here is the Rainbow Family of the Living Light. That organization would have communal celebrations in forest areas, national forest areas. They would go without permits to congregate en masse to celebrate life, love. They were very hippie, free love people. And this organization still exists until this very day. Now, let me give you a little overview on the Rainbow family. I'm just going to read straight from Lisa Cohen's book. We sisters and brothers, children of light, friends of nature, united by our love for each other and our yearning for peace, who call ourselves the Rainbow Family Tribe, humbly invite everyone everywhere to join us in expressing our sincere desire through prayers for peace on earth and harmony among all. And this is how they presented themselves through their invitations, including the one in Pennsylvania that we will be talking about briefly, the Gathering of the Tribes, Pennsylvania, July 1st through 7th, 1986. And they would have these gatherings at different places in the United States. And Jose Antonio Ramos would attend these gatherings that went from Missouri to Michigan to Pennsylvania. Here, we are presented with by the defense that Jose Ramos was a part of this Pennsylvania congregation, and this congregation in 1986 was being investigated by the FBI. And here's the documentation on how the FBI describes this particular event as well as the Rainbow family. On June 17th, 1986, I believe that's Senior Special Agent SSA, and it redacts the name for this joint task force, advised he was in receipt of information from Special Agent, again, we have a redacted name, in Erie, Pennsylvania, who was advised by a local sheriff that captioned group Rainbow Family is a commune type or cult group composed of hippie type individuals from the 60s era who for some reason may be transplacing or already in the Erie, Pennsylvania area. I believe that says transplacing. I don't know what that says, but transplanting? I don't know what that says, but it is alluded that this group has kidnapped. We can't read this, or at least I haven't been able to read this, that this group has kidnapped missing children and may have other missing children within their commune, which is believed to be over 7,000 members. Special Agent, redacted name, also advised that the source of this information apparently is an individual by the name of redacted name who represents an organization by the name of redacted name. This group is financed and supported by redacted information. It is believed that redacted name lives in the redacted location section of redacted location near the redacted location. I hate all these redactions. I hate it, hate it, hate it. In vain of the above, a 79 new case will be opened. Now, this 79, I don't know if this means the year 1979 or a 79 is some kind of numerical code that tags certain cases for the FBI. I looked it up. I couldn't find it. So if anybody listening to this can find it, that would be great. It may even be the designation of this office as it, in the memorandum, we see 2 SAC 79-1481. I also plugged in that number. I didn't get anything, but if anybody here can let me know what they think that means, that would be awesome. So already in June 23rd, of the 23rd of June, 1986, the FBI was very well aware from the Pennsylvania sheriff that this group could potentially be responsible for kidnapping children. Here, in the second memo in this same file, it says Special Agent, redacted name, advised that the Rainbow family was having its annual convention in Warren County, Pennsylvania, from 7/1/86 to 7/7/86. The Rainbow family is composed of hobos and hippies who live all over the U.S. and meet once a year at a U.S. National Forest. In years past, they have met in West Virginia, and last year at the Mark Twain State Park in Missouri, which Jose Ramos was present at. The Pennsylvania State Police will be setting up a command post to handle the 5,000 to 10,000 people expected to attend this year's event. To date, there is no specific information to connect the redacted information to the Rainbow family. There is more redacted information, has requested permission, that may be a redacted name, has requested permission from the Sheriff of Warren County, Pennsylvania, to attend the Rainbow family meeting in an undercover capacity. An undercover capacity. This is somebody who's requesting permission. I don't know if this is an FBI agent, another agency, maybe somebody like the NYPD, their task force, that they want permission from the sheriff of Warren County to attend the Rainbow family meeting in an undercover capacity. The sheriff will be making a telephone call to redacted name to get background information on redacted name in an attempt to determine if he could identify or something is identical to redacted stuff here. I don't know what this means either. So there's a lot of redacted information, but it says from 1985 to 1986 for redacted text box and redacted text box for redacted text box failed to reveal any information on whoever it is that they are looking into. The special agent advised he will be able to interview redacted information in Warren County, Pennsylvania, where he is expected to be on redacted information. And here it gives the article that they found in the local newspaper talking about the arrival of the Rainbow people. They have a copy in this file of that. Now look at these dates, 6/22 and 6/18. Donald Allen, the sheriff of Warren County, 6/18, advised the Rainbow family is going to be coming to Warren County during the week of 7/1/86. Here we see a report or form that needs to be filled. The assistant director in charge is requesting this from the police commissioner, the Honorable Benjamin Ward, from the New York City Police Department, and apparently they're looking for somebody who is Caucasian, male, 5'11", brown hair, and already has a record through them, NYSID 4831898J, and I did try to find that, and I could not locate this number. I went through the police report files, the archives. The only thing I haven't done is a FOIA request, but right now I don't think I'm going to do that yet because they take a long time to get back to you. And this department is looking for photos or requesting photos. This is what also interested me. So when you go to the page 2 of this report, it mentions at the bottom that the Rainbow family was described as Charles Manson type cult, and individuals associated with it were located at 131 Avenue B, New York, New York. Individuals associated with it were located at 131 Avenue B, New York, New York. This is the location of Everything for Everybody, and it gives a phone number that's redacted. I looked up Everything for Everybody, and it seems like it no longer exists, but the history of that building is as a co-op, a place also for people of low incomes, low means to be able to stay. And this is something that may have been an indication that they already had a suspect or suspects that they were looking into for quite some time. In Michigan, the Michigan State Police also provided information to the FBI and to the Sheriff's Department. They had information concerning the Rainbow family, and the Rainbow family was also known to them to be Orena Incorporated. Sheriff Allen, Warren County, advised that special agent redacted name that he thought the redacted name was. So here they have a person of interest for sure. When you come on to the next page, again, we see the identifier as BQMRA. This date is 9/23/86. So we have moved well on from June, and we are now in September. So see here, we see Erie, Pennsylvania, but this says Erie, and that looks like RA. Maybe in the Erie, Pennsylvania area sometime And this redacted name had been driving a redacted with the license. Attempts to locate this person at this address have yielded negative results. It is recommended that this case be administratively closed. And that's the information we get here that I found interesting. Even with all its redactions, it's very compelling because it connects to, because I don't believe in coincidences, especially with this case, to Jose Ramos when he was around that area at that time and starting to be flagged. Now, talking about the Rainbow family and how Jose Antonio Ramos came to the Rainbow family was he was let go by the Bronx police because two reasons. One, the parents of the two kids in the Drainpipe were not going to press charges. They just weren't. So he couldn't be held for that. Also, the Bronx couldn't keep him for the Etan Patz case because it was not in their jurisdiction. All they could do was share information. And that information was given to the New York Police Department, to that whole task force, was given to them in 1982. Months later, Jose Antonio Ramos would be caught soliciting underage boys in Times Square, and that too would result in him walking away from it. The district attorney would refuse to press charges on him, and that also was a Bronx jurisdiction. Another thing that happened is that the police officer who apprehended Jose Antonio Ramos soliciting those underage boys, he reported this activity to the New York Police Department Missing Persons Unit for Manhattan, the unit that would have been overseeing the Etan Patz case, and they ignored the information too, which brings us to Jose Antonio Ramos being able to be present at the gatherings for the Rainbow family. Two were being held. One was being held in Erie, Pennsylvania, and the other one was being held in Warren, Pennsylvania. And Jose Ramos was going to be present at both. I'm going to start here. A year later, in 1986, 2 months before Barry Adams and John Buffalo would come upon Ramos at the Pennsylvania gathering, he showed up at an annual New York Central Park picnic. Now remember, this is 3 to 4 years after Jose Ramos has been on law enforcement's radar. And now, because he has been let go, he is now finding himself in places where kids are, where he can do more harm to children. This organization, the Rainbow Family of the Living Light, were very familiar with Jose Ramos. At least they were slightly suspicious of him, enough to where they felt at the last gathering that they would keep an eye on him and follow him. He could not be without an escort. A year later, in 1986, 2 months before Barry Adams and John Buffalo would come upon Ramos at the Pennsylvania gathering, he showed up at an annual New York Central Park picnic. Joni Freedom wasn't there. She was recuperating from her car accident, but there were other folks who knew to watch out for Ramos, including Dave Massey, one of the group at the Michigan Council back in '83, where they kept an eye on him and escorted him. Instead of demanding that Ramos be walked, Massey, a slight man with a quiet intensity, sat back and observed him, unnoticed, until the crowd of children surrounding Ramos seemed to swell in numbers, growing louder and more boisterous. Massey suddenly had the uncomfortable sensation he was watching the Pied Piper. Hoping to avoid confrontation when the kids were nearby, he began talking softly to individual parents, and little by little they removed their children from the mix. Finally, Massey moved closer with the mental image of hurting his prey. Now he wanted the man to notice him, and Ramos did. As Massey came within arm's length, Ramos picked up a weighty oak table leg from a nearby pile of garbage and made a threatening gesture. Massey stopped but didn't retreat. "It's important that you come sit and do some business," Massey said quietly. "There have been some things said, some accusations leveled. Why don't we straighten these things out?" They stared at each other for a long minute. Massey calculated Ramos had the reach to move forward and swing at him. For his part, the smaller man didn't step in to risk getting his head cracked open. Finally, Ramos backed away, left the area. Later that day, Massey sat up on a hill with a friend and watched the hundreds of people blissfully dancing to an important band in the late afternoon sunshine. "The problem is," Massey said, after he told his friend what happened, "this brother seems like bad news. But who really knows if he's done anything wrong? We just don't have evidence. This would be a very common sentence that is spoken when it comes to Jose Antonio Ramos. Jose Antonio Ramos is not a dumb man, was not a dumb man. In fact, he was just smart enough to be dangerous. He was very in tune with the law. He studied it and he studied people. He worked in advertisement before he decided to give it all up. Jose Antonio Ramos was, when he had a professional career in advertising and with an advertising agency, he was making the equivalent of, I believe it was, hold on, I can do this, about $8,000 a week. He was making anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 a week. He was not somebody who was doing menial work. He was very smart or clever, and he knew what he wanted, and he did not want to live a restricted lifestyle. He knew there was other ways he could make money and be able to do what he wanted to do, whether it was legal or not. Dave Massey hadn't yet arrived at the Pennsylvania gathering, but in the parking lot, both John Buffalo and Barry Adams had no trouble IDing Jose Ramos, both from Buffalo's personal encounters with him and from the old photos the Shanti Senna had passed among themselves their version of a mug shot. Now, the engine of Ramos's converted school bus was idling, ready to take off, but Adams and Buffalo stood in front of it. "Open up, Jose," Barry Adams said as he banged on the door. "We'd like to talk with you." The door folded in slowly to reveal Jose Ramos, his hands clenched on the wheel, looking ready to bolt. "Hey, I heard tell that you've been with our kids, which is against our agreement. You remember that agreement you made not to be with our kids?" "Oh, no, no." The denials were clearer. "No, I haven't been with any kids. Everything's cool." "What's that?" Adams stiffened. "Who's back there? Come on out." Adams and Buffalo craned their heads around to look inside the dark recesses of the bus. A small shape emerged and took focus. 7-year-old Billy Taylor. Out of the thousands of rainbows gathered here, Adams just happened to know this boy well. The curly head moved forward into the brighter front space, squinted his blue eyes against the light, and acknowledged his parents' longtime friend. "Hey, Plunker," he said. "Are you okay?" Adams said. The boy nodded. "Get off the bus, son. Go find your folks." "We're just riding around," Billy said. "We're going to get some gas." The boy seemed a little defensive, a little defiant. Adams knew Billy wasn't old enough to understand the danger he could have been in if the Shanti Senna hadn't arrived. "We see it's June 23rd before anything is done or reported by the state trooper, Blaine Coon." So to say that the exposure happened June 23rd is not right. Somebody in Michigan, Missouri, there was something that happened. It could have even happened at the picnic, the New York picnic that was mentioned earlier. Somebody said something, reported something, and I'm going to say that it was a Rainbow family member because only they would know where the next gathering would be. They alerted the Pennsylvania sheriff about this gathering and about what their concerns were. And if I had to guess, it would be somebody that could make a difference, that could make things move. They were undercover. They knew who this person would be. And to me, it just makes more sense that it could possibly have been, and again, this is my belief, that the informant, if you will, somebody like Garrick Beck, who lived in New York City, East Village, Joni Freedom lived in New York City, East Village, and John Buffalo, Jose Antonio Ramos, lived in the East Village. He also worked in the East Village. In the book After Etan, it said, the well-spoken, urbane Garrick Beck, one of the first organizers, was a renowned rainbow figure with deep roots in New York's counterculture movement. Calm, measured, Earth Mother Joni Freedom, another New Yorker, recognized the man being watched by John Buffalo from the streets near her home in the East Village. Dave Massey, a relative newcomer to the Shanti Senna, that's the Security Council, just sat quietly and listened. Dave Massey, was he maybe the secret agent? Were they the ones that wanted somebody to go undercover? Were they the group that said they were funded and we saw all those redactions? Or was it the group that was immediately formed after Etan Patz was missing? Let me see if I can find that. Okay, this is the organization. Julie was in touch with grassroots shoestring organizations around the country, from the Bergen County Missing Persons Bureau to California Stolen Child Information Exchange. From sea to shining sea, there were parents of missing children who, in trying to find their children, found each other, and they all seemed to converge at Julie Patz's door. Again, this is from After Etan by Lisa Cohen. So a few months later, Kitty Brown called Julie again to ask her about appearing together on a Philadelphia talk show. By then, Kitty was doing volunteer work for an upstate New York group, Child Find, founded by a woman whose ex-husband had gone into hiding with her daughter. Child Find focused on parental abductions, getting missing children's photos distributed as widely as possible, and serving as a point of contact for runaways as well. If for whatever reason a child did not want his parents to know his whereabouts, Child Find could work as a third party to mediate or get messages through. Like other fledgling advocates, the group was feeling its way, but as the issue of missing children got more exposure, Kitty, the newly named information director, was being asked to make media appearances. Okay, so again, Child Find may be the organization because Child Find started doing a lot of these types of outreach activities to get the awareness out there. And this would be in 1980. So it seems like it could be that in 1986, this organization would have been defined enough by then to be able to offer this kind of information to the FBI in terms of the Rainbow of the Living Light organization, which had already been under high scrutiny from the FBI. And the reason I know this is also from FBI files that even predate the 80s, where they were looking into the Rainbow family of the Living Light. On 5/13/75, this is coming from the FBI. On 5/13/75, Arkansas State Police, Criminal Investigator, Narcotics Division, Fayetteville, Arkansas, advised that he had received information from two reliable sources that captioned group which consists of 3,000 to 4,000 individuals scattered throughout the western states, plans to gather in northwest Arkansas for a 4th of July celebration. Again, these gatherings started mostly occurring around July 4th. They started off at 3,000 to 4,000 people, but by the time 86 rolled around, you can see that they had tripled that by then, if not even more. Redacted name advised that both of his sources stated that the Rainbow family had resided in the state of Utah, the state of Colorado, the state of Texas near Austin, and currently reside in the state of Oregon. One leader of the Rainbow family is wanted in either Utah or Colorado for the murder of a police officer. This would be under federal jurisdiction, not only because it was crossing state lines, but also because it involved law enforcement, a crime against law enforcement. Redacted name did not know the name of this individual, however, had received information that the FBI in either Utah or Colorado is seeking this particular person. Okay, so now we see that in 1975, the Rainbow family is on the FBI's radar because of this person who they suspected murdered a police officer. If we go on down more, we're going to see that they get even more exposure to nefarious illegal activities occurring within this group, and it would be narcotics. And then there would be another case where they believed that there could be members that were responsible for the deaths of two young people. While they were investigating these, they also noticed that there was a heavy involvement of narcotics traffic within the family and activities promoting the overthrow of the U.S. government. This, in and of itself, would keep agents around this organization because of that. In fact, even until this day, they get agents that go to these gatherings under the anti-terrorist umbrella, even now until this day. I find it hard to believe that with all this scrutiny on them, that Jose Antonio Ramos, and we're going to get to where I think he fits even beyond inappropriate relationships with young children at these events, while he may have been already under FBI scrutiny. And Jose Ramos, well, we already know, not only was he a street vendor, But he also seemed to find himself everywhere where illicit activities seemed to be occurring that were heavily monitored by federal agents and had a high degree of mob activity as well as international exposure. And we're going to get to that next video. So I'm going to have to do some heavy editing on this video to make it in digestible chunks of information. But the main takeaway from this is that just by reading the transcripts, we can already start seeing that there were other forces because a little boy does not go missing walking 2 blocks in a very familiar neighborhood unless there were operations around that little boy that were designed to make it so. We're going to keep doing a deep dive on that. It's going to all start coming together. Right now, we're on the federal level, and we're kind of like touching on the local and state level, but we will be getting to the community level. Okay, so thank you for sticking with me. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and God bless you. See you later.